Okay.
Alrighty.
We're on, are we? Fair enough.
No, it's all good. Everything's going to get cut. You're probably going to see snippets of this. You'll probably find, out of all this, I might find 2 or 3 quotes.
Yep. Okay.
That's all I'm looking for. So, basically, how I've started these off, after we've had our initial little conversation type of thing,
Yes.
is I normally explain to people why I'm doing it, but you already know.
Yes.
Okay. But if you were trying to tell someone apart from me why you actually think we did what we did, why would you say? What would you say?
We did what we did during 2010 and 2012, or
No, but what would you actually just? That's, I suppose what we did in 10 and 12 led us to do the CLP.
Yep.
But I suspect that we need to have that kind of information captured, sort of like
Yep.
it's the old. The reason why we did it was this, and how we did it was that. The reasons why I think it was beneficial were this.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I think one of the main reasons I'm very much an advocate for the community-led planning is during 2010 and 2012, I really felt that I let down the Brindabella community in particular when they were impacted by flooding, because we just simply didn't have the resources to be able to get out there and help those people because we were too tied up with stuff that was closer in. So that was work unfinished for me, I guess. I wanted to finish that, and I want to follow that one through even now because of, I guess there's a bit of personal satisfaction and personal ownership that I think we didn't do what we could have been able to do a little better had we had the tools then to do it.
If you had those tools, what would those tools have been?
I think just the relationships with the communities out there, with the people at the RFS. That's probably, and a bit of training and some equipment out there is the main thing. I think if we were able to have that in place, it would have helped considerably. And have of that formal warden system, which now, since then, we've been able to set up. And again, I'm a real advocate of that warden system on these remote communities so they can be our eyes and ears out there, because there's no formal rainfall warning devices, or what's there is possibly inadequate.
Let's look at the technical side of how the SES now can actually use some of this information. We talked about the wardens.
Yep.
How do you see us developing information that we're getting from these wardens?
Yes.
How can we formalise that into our operational rooms?
Well, I think we can add that into, first of all, the flood action cards, that gives us trigger points. And just building that relationship over a period of time makes it so that during an operation, when we ring up, the people know what it's about and are able to talk to us in the same language, I guess, is one of the most important things.
So we've actually got, we had a pretty good run out of Brindabella with that exercise we did. How do you think we could actually maintain that?
I think to maintain that, you need to revisit it on a fairly regular basis to keep things reasonably fresh in people's community members' minds, because after a period of time, people get very complacent about things like flooding. Up until 2010, I can't recall any major flooding events in that particular area for a long period of time, and my involvement in floods in the Tumut Shire particularly go back to formally 1984 and then probably 1974 informally, or 75. I came to that area just after the 74 floods, sort of thing. Yeah.
Alrighty. You're in Quinty.
Yes.
What was your first involvement when you were in Quinty?
My first involvement out there was, again, because I'm an advocate and very keen on that community-led planning mechanism, I pricked my ears up when yourself, Ian Leckie, Community Engagement Coordinator, mentioned that that sort of thing was happening in that community, so I really wanted to get on board with it because I really believe in it. I really am passionate and believe that's the way we can go to do things better in the future, because the SES in Murrumbidgee, 300 volunteers, if that, the old rule of thumb where you may be able to get a third of those volunteers at any one particular time, so that cuts it back to 100. Particularly Murrumbidgee Valley flooding impacts a number of communities right throughout the area. We just physically don't have the resources to be able to be everything to everyone, or the be all and end all. So we just can't do it. So we've got to work out better ways of doing it, smarter ways of doing it, and I think community-led planning is definitely going down that track.
What's your recollection of the first meeting you went to?
I was just blown away because of that ownership that that community had. Unbelievable that they were developing that, they were driving it themselves. They were very passionate because they had the impacts during those two events and knew the threats and wanted to help themselves. They had the same realisation that we do, that we can't physically provide that support. So they just took the ball and ran with it, and that was just incredible, actually. Incredible how they took it on.
Do you think that we have to revisit the way we think about operations in an emergency services context, in the fact where centralisation of decisions can work, but with towns where you have no eyes or ears, it doesn't work?
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I'm country through and through, born and bred, and I've lived on the land, all those sorts of things. And one of the things that rural people, and look, I've come a long way, but I understand that rural people particularly hate bureaucrats coming in from their ivory towers in other areas and telling them, not asking them. And I think one of the things that rural people like is to have that ownership and that input. Obviously conditions change and you know, they don't know everything either, but I think if you can have that partnership rather than the big stick approach, I think is one of the main things that we need to go down in the future, because we did suffer from that in those major flood events with a big stick approach where we went in and we said, you will do this, this and this, instead of having that more informal arrangement. I know we did have community meetings, but yeah, I think you've got to go in, you've got to be empathetic, got to understand the situations and have that involvement.
How long do you reckon it would take for, just in a small town, what type of time frame would you advise people to give if you want to set up a CLP? You know, like from start to finish in just a small town like Quinty, if you're advising other DRC, what would you say to them?
I'd say it takes at least 6 to 12 months. I reckon 6 months at least is a minimum. We were very lucky in Quinty. We had the right mindsets, the people were on board. But some other communities that we've got to first of all convince them and then create that structure, I think probably would take at least 12 months, but definitely 6 to 12 months, yeah, in my opinion.
Do you see it as being something that you need to do on a revisiting basis with them rather than just being intensive, trying to bombard them? Or how if you're going to try and, if you were instructing a CEC, for example, you be into the position, how would you advise them to go about laying the groundwork, how you'd suggest to them, seeing Quinty, how to pace themselves?
Yeah, well, I think it was very, very well done. There was a whole host of staggered meetings. I think that is much better. They were able to go away from the meetings, think about things and come back. And some of the stuff they agreed with, some of the stuff they workshopped, they chopped and changed and came up with some different approaches. And I think that's the way to do it. I think going in hard in one foul swoop wouldn't achieve that ideal outcome. I think it needs to be a staged approach over a period of time, definitely.
what was your thoughts about the actual exercise, the community exercise that they did in the field?
Again, I think it was very well run. I think because they had the ownership, it just went like clockwork. There was things that we can do better next time, or they can do better. And the idea of an exercise is to learn from it. If it goes so smoothly that and things don't go wrong, the exercise hasn't achieved what it set out to do. So it's a learning experience, and I think we need to have fairly regular exercises over a period, at least probably biannually, or biannually probably might be a bit better. If we do too much, I think again people get sick of it. So we've got to just work out that mix, I think, in the future as well, the best formula for how regular you have to revisit. Or maybe even a desktop one year and a hands-on one the next year, or something like that.
Let's talk about what we can give them after, we leave them, type of thing. Not the follow-on events or anything like that, but we're talking about sheds and what do you think would be a good outcome for a remote town that we know has a distinct flood threat, which can be mitigated by using sandbanks or something like that? What do you see are things that we could actually, as the SES, provide to them in advance?
Well, I think the basic tools, and again that varies a little bit from community to community. When we're at Brindabella, they were much more interested in the torpedoes and the throw bags and that type of thing, because they've experienced that swift water and the deep V flooding. However, at Uranquinny, they were more interested in the sandbagging and that side of it, and the sandbag jigs. So I think each individual community needs to be assessed, and as we go down the valley, I think the sandbagging becomes more prominent. As we go up the valley, when we get into the deeper V's, the flood rescue component becomes more relevant to the situation. So, yeah, I think the main thing is it's probably horses for courses. You need to kit the community for their particular needs. But I think a good idea would be a little pod of some description, a little shed or a pod, have some simple signage on it, and have that equipment stored in each of the communities.
I had a question and I just lost it.
I keep rubbing my nose too, you'll have to cut that out.
No,
I'm getting an itchy nose.
We get from the start of your quote to the end of your quote, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So all this bit.
So these questions, I know the camera's rolling.
Yeah, no, that's all right. This all gets cut.
Okay.
What we're talking about right now, that doesn't last 5 seconds.
Yep.
What we do is I find that the quotable quotes, I'll take that and I'll put that into another file. I'll label what that is, and that goes to the editor then, so you can actually start splicing them together.
Yep.
Like when I ask a question, all my voice will be removed.
Okay.
And what you'll see on the screen is you'll probably see, what resources do you think the SES could provide to the community? And they'll probably come to the corner, because as from the screen, you're over here.
Yep.
So I can put a question over here.
Yep.
And so that'll go up on the screen, and you'll just be answering the question. You won't hear from me at all.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Do you get that, Steve? That's what you're supposed to do. I had a good question. It was quite important to me too.
In relation to the equipment or the shed or...
No. It's just a general advice thing. Can't think of it. It's gone. It was just another general advice, where you could probably just say why we should be doing these things. But it's gone. Anything you wanted to say about CLP or Quinty, or how we can progress, or how you should want to structure it with budgets or anything?
Yeah, well, look, I think we need to enhance our budgets to be able to fund more of this type of work. I think the limited budget that we've got at the moment gets stretched very well. And look, dollar for dollar or bang for your buck, I think it's well worth it. Well worth it. So I'd like to see some enhancement in that area for sure. What else was I going to say? I was just going to say something else as well. what was the second part of your question?
Well, it was sort of like, what would you, almost a general endorsement of CLPs.
Yeah. Look, we have in the Murrumbidgee region, we have a range of communities. Some of the communities are quite bitter about what's occurred during recent flood events, and I think there's going to be a lot more work required in some of those communities to get up to the same sorts of levels as Quinny. But what I hope to be able to do in that space is use some of the community champions from Quinny and take them to these other communities and pass on their experiences. I think if community members hear it from other community members, I think, and the successes, I think that's going to go a long way towards solving some of the issues, particularly in communities like Yenda and Hay and some other parts of around Griffith. I don't know whether you want me to name communities or not, because that can get, particularly Hay, could get a little political.
Probably that'll bit on, well, I'll probably just edit that bit. But,
Yeah.
Partnerships with the community.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had Origin and the council. You know how...
Yes, I do. Look, community partnerships are vital, absolutely vital. I think because it's the whole community, we need to involve all of them. Council definitely needs to be supportive of the arrangements. Local businesses need to be a part of it. Even at Quinny, we've seen where the local service station was on board, and also the local hotel was going to become the one of the operations